Drug abuse and mental health is something so clearly visible on the streets in our communities, but this problem is not unique to Western Washington.
Yeah, California just passed a controversial new law that puts the state in charge of people who regularly cycle through the system. It means they can force people off the street and into housing or treatment programs. So Simone Del Rosario is here to take a look at whether that could actually work here in our state.
So it's called conservatorship, and it basically strips someone from being able to make their own decisions. The controversy is a civil liberties concern, from physically taking away someone's freedom and putting the state in charge of their lives. Now, these are the scenes that we see on our streets. There's no denying that Western Washington has a problem with mental health and substance abuse, and it impacts not just the people here suffering from it, but bystanders walking down the street and also businesses. But it's a high threshold to get these people the help they may need when they don't want it. In the state, you can involuntarily commit someone when they pose an imminent risk to themselves, to someone else's property, or if they fall under this grave disability category where they're so impaired they can't take care of their own basic needs like food, shelter, or water.
Our involuntary commitment threshold is incredibly high. It's one of the highest in the nation, and I would argue that yes, it is too high. We have individuals who are desperately in need of care, who at their point of crisis, the only liberties that they retain are the liberties of their delusions or the liberties of their methamphetamine-induced psychosis, and that it is rather inhumane to do nothing.
So that's State Rep Lauren Davis. Now, you may not know this, but before last year, only people with mental health issues could be involuntarily committed here in Washington. It didn't apply to people with substance abuse, like her best friend, Ricky, for whom she was the primary caregiver.
He ended up repeatedly in the emergency department and in the psychiatric hospital, in the intensive care unit after he nearly died, and he was not able to get the help he needed. He was not willing or able at that time to consent to voluntary substance use disorder treatment, and yet he was dying of substance use disorder at age 24.
Well, Ricky eventually did get that care, but since then, Davis pushed for what is known as Ricky's Law. She still says the threshold for involuntary commitment is too high and that a lack of resources means not everyone gets help. Now, in California, what they're doing is taking people who have been under psychiatric holds 8 or more times in a year and forcing them into government care. I asked Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes what he thinks about it. He told me in a statement, investment in our region's mental health system, including both voluntary and involuntary treatment, is essential for the well-being of everyone, especially those who suffer this traumatic illness. As the California program gets off the ground, it'll certainly be worth evaluating its outcomes. And Hannah, I know that you're out there covering this issue so much. And actually this week you talked to a judge who said there's a huge gap in people who are incompetent but can't be committed, don't reach that threshold.
Yeah, you know, you just talked about Pete Holmes. Obviously, he's dealing with repeat offenders coming through his court. When I talked to that local judge, the judge said, look, he didn't have a specific number, but he knows that there's a big subset of people who are falling through the cracks, like you said, caught in the middle. One prime example that I brought up in my story on Wednesday is Jonathan Wilson. He was the guy accused of trying to push a woman off of an overpass onto I-5. He's the perfect example. He was found incompetent in court, but was not sick enough to be, you know, put into civil commitment. So you've got this big gap in the system that we need to do something about. And it sounds like state lawmakers are really trying to ramp this up and find some solutions here.
Trying to and searching for so many different types of proposals. And again, looking at what California is doing as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for that heads up. Appreciate it, Simone.